On my way up to the Hill today, I encountered a great young man named Mathew. He works as a landscaper. He's doing some of the landscaping around our beautiful parliamentary precinct. Mathew is a worker. He's a member of LIUNA. He has the kind of job that built our country. You know, waves after waves of immigrants came here and worked in construction to build our roads, our facilities, and to make, in the case of Mathew, who is from Winchester, to beautify our communities and had jobs that could provide them with a good life. That if they got out of the bed in the morning and worked hard all day, as people like Mathew always do, they could expect to have a home, put good, nutritious food on the table, and pay the bills for their kids. But Mathew pulled me aside to tell me about the silent attack on him and people like him that has occurred over the last year in Canada. And it is the silent tax we call inflation. Ever since, and it speaks to how out of touch the members of this House of Commons are, that they burst into laughter when I mention the struggles that people like Mathew are having with inflation. Maybe they won't be laughing after they hear the whole story. In Winchester, where he lives, he's seen house prices skyrocket as cash has flowed into the system, and those with money have been able to bid up housing prices. Young people with less accumulated net equity cannot, therefore, make a purchase. One family in a Riverside South community not far from here has been outbid 9 times, most recently, for a house that went $400,000 over asking price. It was a house that was on the listed for $800,000, and it went for $1.2 million. This family is losing hope of ever owning a home. Now, this massive increase in housing prices has coincided with the government's decision to pay its bills with printed money. The last fiscal year, the Bank of Canada lent $300 billion to the government, more than the government normally collects in taxes. This year, they're going to lend, at the present rate, $156 billion. This has increased the money supply by 20%. And what has that done to inflation? Well, this month, inflation has gone above the 2% target that Bank of Canada says that it will reach. Furthermore, specific items, particularly those items that the poor spend a larger share of their budget on, like food, have gone up even more. Meat prices are up about 6%, bakery 5%, vegetables 6%. Gas prices have gone up from 78 cents to $1.18. And of course, housing prices are up by 38%. Now, this is great news if you're rich. If you have a $10 million mansion and your property value goes up by 38%, you've gained almost $4 million in money in net worth that you didn't even have to work for. But if you're a working class person who gets up every day and tries to build up enough savings for a down payment on a house through wages that don't rise as fast as housing prices, then you're out of luck. And not only is it more difficult for you to afford that original down payment, but it's now more expensive to rent because landlords pass on the higher housing and real estate prices to their tenants. And that is the surprise and sneaky attack that this government is carrying out on working class people across this country. Now, what is the justification for all of this money printing? Well, originally, the central bankers came to the Finance Committee and said, don't worry, we're doing this extraordinary thing of buying up government debt and pumping cash into the system solely to ensure what they called the efficient functioning of the market. Whenever they use indiscernible words, they're hiding something. We know that the market is functioning. Both capital and credit markets are flowing. The stock market actually rose, and the TSX rose in market value above the size of our entire economy, about a fifth higher, in fact, something that has never happened in modern financial history in Canada. And as for credit markets, well, mortgage lending is up in volume by 20% year over year, a massive growth, especially in a year when the economy actually went down. So clearly, the market is functioning just fine. Then they said, oh, we just need to protect the money supply. We don't want everyone to be afraid of COVID and stuff their money under their beds to make sure, because they're afraid of losing everything, and in the process collapse the money supply. Well, that's not a problem either, because the money supply is actually increased, and by the M2 measure, by 20%, just like mortgage volumes. And then they said, well, we just need to make sure there's enough cash in the system. Well, households and corporations have $200 billion in the bank account right now. So that can't be the justification. By the way, the households that have that cash are, of course, the very wealthy who benefit from these schemes. So that cannot be the justification for all of this money printing, nor can their last claim that they were trying to stop deflation. They all said, the last three governors of this Bank of Canada have said that this is a disinflationary event. Prices would drop. Well, we now know that wasn't true either. I said it a year ago and I say it again. Their money printing is raising the prices, and inflation is now above the 2% market target, with the governor of the Bank of Canada admitting that it could go higher still in the next reported monthly data. So it's not fighting deflation that they're doing. So what has motivated this? Well, let's just look at the numbers for themselves. Last year, the government's deficit was $352 billion. How much debt did the Bank of Canada buy? $302 billion. 85% of the new debt this government issued was bought up by the central bank, effectively turning on its printing presses. This year, well, on a Monday, the finance minister announced that she would have a $154 billion deficit. On the Wednesday of the same week, 2 days later, the bank governor said he was going to buy $156 billion. So these guys over here are borrowing $154 billion, and the Bank of Canada, of course, is lending $156 billion. Total coincidence that the two line up almost exactly the same, and that they were both announced within 48 hours of one another. Of course, the Bank of Canada is simply acting as the funding arm of the government. And because the government cannot control its spending, it is asking the bank to print the money instead, driving up the costs of living for people, working class people like Matt, who deserve a house and food and clothing for his family, but may not be able to afford it because of the inflation that the government is driving. Madam Speaker, this is the inflation tax that the government is imposing that is ultimately just like raising the GST. It applies to everything that people buy, makes life more expensive. It's time to get it under control.
The honourable member still has a minute and 30 seconds. I do have a point of order. The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Just on the relevance.
The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, there's no doubt that the deficit that the Bank of Canada is funding through its printing presses is in part due to this government's failure to deliver vaccines and let our economies reopen. That is obvious. But what is even more obvious by the question is that I talk about this working class man who is literally building this place around Parliament Hill, who comes up and says he wants to have a house, but his wages might not be able to afford it because of the inflationary policies of this government. And what does the member say? Oh my goodness, yawn, not relevant. We don't need to hear stories like that around here. This is the House of Commons, the House of the common people. We speak for people like Mathew. It is not only relevant, but it is of supreme relevance what people like that say to us. And I would encourage him and other government members to walk out in the streets of this country and find out how people are struggling with the higher prices that the money printing policies of this government are causing. If they did so, they might understand the relevance, and they might take a different course, a course that rewards hard work, it protects the soundness of our money, and ensures that people get ahead through their merits, not through their inheritance and their aristocracy. Thank you.